Friends, as nerds, what we get the most enjoyment from also provides us with plenty of fodder for debates, discussions, speculation, and even sometimes a healthy argument. Character motivations, plot holes or contrivances, twists or cliffhanger endings are all fair game for banter either online or off. But one of the most hotly debated subjects amongst virtually any fan base is the topic of canon. Welcome aboard Space Castle, where our continuing mission is to search the universe for all things nerdy. I'm your Captain DT, and I personally have spent countless hours of my life debating the subject of canon.
It's true. I've heard so much of it, I nearly F-disked myself.
The idea of what's quote-unquote real in the happenings and universes of our favorite intellectual properties is rife for debate. And with certain properties, the idea of what's actually canon or not is muddy even for the creators themselves. With shared universes, reboots, spin-offs, and the sale and purchase of properties, the confusion of what's actually canon for our favorite movies, TV shows, comics, and more is almost always up for debate. But you might be asking yourself what canon even is, why it matters, and how it became such a hot topic in the first place. Let's take a look. Now, just so we're clear, we're not talking about Canon, the camera company, although they make some pretty great stuff. We're also not talking about the defunct film production company, the Canon Group, the makers of such timeless classics as American Ninja, American Ninja 2, Masters of the Universe, American Ninja 3, Cobra, Death Wish 3, American Ninja 5, and Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo. Nor are we talking about the oldest definition of canon, which has to do with ecclesiastical authority, the naming of people as saints, and such things as that. Most notably enacted by the Catholic Church, canon law is all about the laws and principles in place to direct Catholics toward the mission of the church. There's probably a whole other corner of YouTube for that sort of thing, but here, right now, we're talking about the real serious shit. We are talking about the concept of which films, TV shows, or episodes, comic book issues, and other forms of media within a contained franchise are deemed valid and true to the overall stories. Now, when you go looking for the definition of canon and the biggest examples of them online, you are of course slapped in the face with both Star Wars and Star Trek. They are undoubtedly the biggest hubs of canon discussion and debate, and for good reason. There are surprisingly very few examples of hard guidelines for what's canon or not with large franchises, but Star Trek actually bucks that trend. Star Trek's official site from the years 2010 until now officially lists canon as anything that occurs on screen in both TV shows and movies. This includes Lower Decks, which is actually pretty cool. People still want to argue what is and actually isn't Star Trek canon though, and many people cite that only the projects that Gene Roddenberry himself was directly involved with are canon, as he was the creator and curator of all things Star Trek. However, Roddenberry himself went against this very idea. He created Star Trek for everyone, and he held a widely inclusive and tolerant point of view for all people, and he wanted his baby to continue on well after he had passed away. So his ideas and his principles carry on to this day, and as such, everything that's produced to take place on screen in front of audiences in an officially sanctioned manner is considered canon. Yes, even the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies, they're considered canon, but in an alternate timeline fashion sort of way. They're real. Yeah, we gotta swallow the fact that J.J. Abrams has contributed to Star Trek canon in a meaningful way, but we also have the fact that Simon Pegg has written a canon Star Trek film as well, and that's pretty cool. And in a weird sort of cross-pollination, J.J. Abrams has also directed 2 Star Wars movies, and yeah, look, Star Wars canon is all kinds of f***ed up. In similar fashion to how people felt about Gene Roddenberry, many Star Wars fans hold on to the idea that only the George Lucas directed Star Wars films are canon, those being the original and prequel trilogies. But in the 15-year gap between the releases of those trilogies, many authors and artists were able to contribute to the Star Wars universe and mythos. We got such notable works as Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy of novels and Shadows of the Empire. Now, Shadows of the Empire was an interesting thing. It was a multimedia mini-franchise within Star Wars that was created by Lucasfilm with input from George Lucas himself. The thesis of the whole thing was to tell a story set between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and make a whole bunch of money on a whole new storyline in Star Wars without actually having to make a Star Wars movie. And so we got a novel by Steve Perry, not that Steve Perry, a comic by John Wagner, and all sorts of cool stuff like a Nintendo 64 video game, action figures, and audio recordings, and it was all kind of cynical in retrospect. It was sort of an exploitation of a fan base that was really hungry for more meaningful Star Wars. But Shadows of the Empire actually turned out pretty cool, so we ate it up. But even during its inception, and with the hands of George Lucas directly involved, whether or not it was actually canon was hotly debated. Was the story's main hero, Dash Rendar, actually one of the snowspeeder pilots at the Battle of Hoth, who would go on to be intrinsically linked with both Luke and Leia in their quest to save Han Solo? Was the Black Sun Syndicate and the Falleen Crime Syndicate led by Prince Shizor concrete parts of the Star Wars universe and mythos? Well, the endless debates on the subject were made moot when Disney purchased Star Wars in 2012, and in 2014 they announced that everything in the affectionately referred to expanded universe of Star Wars was entirely decanonized, and they would be moving forward with a clean slate of canon. So everything from Timothy Zahn's novels to Shadows of the Empire, along with thousands of other novels, comics, games, and other such media, were no longer valid as real parts of Star Wars. But because Disney now owns all those discarded pieces of media, they're free to repurpose them as they, or should I say Dave Filoni, see fit. So Grand Admiral Thrawn, the Black Sun and Falling Crime Syndicates, and many other concepts and characters created by various artists and writers over the years have been cherry-picked and reworked to suit the whims and stories of Dave Filoni. Which, it kind of really feels icky to me personally. Like, I know Timothy Zahn was pretty psyched to have Thrawn come back in some fashion and be a big part of, Star Wars Rebels and the new Ahsoka series on Disney+. But to me, it feels weird that Disney freed themselves of obligation to all those characters and ideas and those creators, only to kind of turn around and Frankenstein them into something different and kind of honestly exploit the nostalgia many Star Wars fans have for such things. But hey, that's corporate America. So really, unless canon is specifically laid out by the ownership groups of a property in black and white text, it's generally up for interpretation. Many people, myself included, really love Marvel's Daredevil series on Netflix. The show, created by Drew Goddard, brought classic Marvel characters to life in stark, dramatic, and sometimes scary fashion, and beautifully rendered the ideas of Matt Murdock's conflict between his Catholic beliefs and believing that vigilantism outside the law is sometimes needed to stop the bad people and help the good ones. And it gave us a Kingpin who was truly scary, imposing, and carried with him layers of depth and tragedy along with that menacing swagger. But now we see Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin, as played by Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio, appearing in bits of Marvel material like the She-Hulk and Hawkeye series on Disney+, in radically different tones and portrayals. And we as the fans were initially really excited to see these characters we loved make a return to the mainstream Marvel Cinematic Universe. But their arrival was bittersweet. The resurgence of these characters in Hawkeye and She-Hulk are considerably different than the ones we loved. And Marvel has been weirdly vague as to whether these are indeed the same characters or if some sort of alternate timeline and universe wackiness is at play. And with the introduction of the multiverse and all that goofiness, Disney and Marvel have given themselves free rein, much like with Star Wars, to cherry pick and repurpose characters the fans love and shove them into other projects without much explanation. So I guess unless, like I said, it's publicly laid out by the creators or producers of a property, canon is largely subjective. And actually, when I think about it, I think canon should be subjective anyway. With the oversaturation of the big franchises out there like Star Wars, Star Trek, and Marvel, and the wide variety of projects within them in terms of tone, there's enough out there that we as fans can basically pick and choose what we want from them. And that brings me to my last topic, headcanon. The best canon.
Ooh, you mean the last time you spacewalked outside the space castle and I fired the cannon at your head as a joke? That was the best cannon.
No. And no, that was not funny. I almost died. I had to buy a new helmet, and I had to shave my head because you singed my hair and I looked like f***ing Rufio from Hook. I mean headcanon, like the idea that fans of a property are free to decide for themselves what's actually real or true and build their own idea of canonical timelines. Like take Star Wars, for example. My own personal headcanon is... Okay, this is gonna blow your mind and probably piss some people off, so let's take a brief interlude to prepare you mentally. My personal Star Wars headcanon is the original trilogy. Like, that's it. Everything outside Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi is not actual canon for me personally. Even the prequels, written and directed by George Lucas himself, feel so disconnected and totally out of whack with the first 3 films that I don't really consider them direct canon, and I think of them more of like Elseworlds type of storytelling with the original creator just having a weird sort of fun in his own sandbox. And everything that's been created by Disney, the sequel trilogy, The Mandalorian, the Clone Wars series, all of it, take it or leave it. Some of it is good, some of it is real bad, but ultimately the only real concrete canon for me in Star Wars is the original trilogy. This has helped me hold on to my love of Star Wars and emotionally reconcile all the weird shit that the franchise has gone through over the last 40 years. And I just sleep better. Feel free to leave a comment below on whether you agree with this or not, or whether you're one of those intense prequel-loving Star Wars fans who think that C-3PO's adventures through the droid factory and Chewbacca being BFFs with Yoda are the real Star Wars. Ultimately, I think we as fans owe it to ourselves to not view canon as the strict, be-all end-all way to enjoy the franchises we love. I think it's healthier to take what we like, leave the rest, and not force ourselves to have to consume every single piece of media that comes out and try to convince ourselves that it's all good by default because it's part of the greater whole. So ultimately, what is canon? Honestly, I think it's a fabricated construct. I think it's become an idea created by the holders of properties to create a sense of urgency in fans to view everything in a universe as it comes out, for fear of missing some vital piece of the larger story. I think it's something that we as fans have used to hold ourselves back from just enjoying what we like about our favorite franchises, and allowing ourselves to take a pass on the lesser quality stuff. Because what matters in the end is that you're having fun with your favorite movies, books, shows, and games, and not turning it into some sort of homework or a source of contention between yourself and the rest of the fan base. So what's an interesting bit of your own headcanon for your own favorite franchise? Leave a comment down below and let's talk about it. Or head on over to the Space Castle Discord and join the conversation there. There's always a link to it in the show notes below, as well as a link to become part of the Space Castle Galactonauts on Patreon. These awesome folks have done so, and they keep the mission of the Space Castle alive to explore the universe for all things nerdy. Thanks so much to them, and to you for checking out this video, liking, subscribing, and sharing it with a friend. I'll catch you in the next episode, which will be canon. This is your Captain DT, signing off.